Okay, so welcome to the Node.js Community TSC meeting for December 19th, 2018. We're going to follow our standard agenda, starting with announcements. Does anybody have any announcements that they'd like to share? Okay, that sounds like no. So let's move on to the issues that were tagged in the agenda under Node.js/Node. The first one is fixing child process module to check values passed strictly to the options object, number 24267. And we did have a bit of a discussion on this last time. What we'd agreed was to invite Loran to, I guess, frame the discussion and answer any questions. And hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at it in the meantime as well. So Loran, do you want to just give us a bit of a context and what's the discussion's been so far?
Yes. So this kind of originated through a security issue that was moved up to the Node.js security working group for the ecosystem models through some model that makes an underlying use of child process. And this is how I kind of got into this one. So the idea is that basically through a prototype manipulation attack would be possible to change some kind of logic underlying in spawn or exec or something else that child process is exposing. And this PR is basically trying to kind of be on the safe side with how it treats the options arguments that it receives. And with regards, so I think that's kind of summarizing it, as it's not too much of a heavy issue, but I think the discussion has been quite good in terms of feedback around whether we want to do this in this particular case, or is this something that we're going to revert all of the APIs, which I think is not really the case for that. We're pretty much in agreement that making that change is too big.
I guess one of the concerns raised was, if we did this, does it set a precedent that says that people will look at it and say, well, you did it here, why don't you do it other places? Do you have thoughts on that?
So I would say that if this would be minimizing an attack surface, then I would say it makes sense. I'm not sure it completely does, as I think both Nikita kind of pointed out that generally speaking, if you would just manipulate a prototype object throughout the node system, a lot of other stuff will break as well. So it's not really too much of a protection in that sense if someone would go and change it. And the only thing where I could maybe think that this could help is if we use it as some kind of a generic sanitization function, which we actually I think also already have, not really total generic, but just for the child process one. So I'm still not sure, in terms of if we want to land it as is. I think the code change itself is okay, but I do agree that it opens it up for different, like you said, different use cases, whether they fit other cases or just in general, if this is a pattern that we want to follow.
Was there an actual security issue mentioned in this? I heard something about that in the beginning, but I didn't really catch.
Right. So it was not to Node core specifically. It was sent to the Node ecosystem team, and it was through a model that basically makes use of child process. And the POC was basically someone just altering the prototype change just before that and showing that this happens. That probably is kind of shooting yourself in the foot if someone would go and do that. But the thing is that that's not the only case, because we've seen other models that I think Nikita also mentioned that were susceptible to a prototype manipulation attack. So generally speaking, you could have a chain of events where one model who would be maybe parsing some kind of input would be manipulated into changing, the options object to shell equals true. And if that application also makes use of, a child process, and the input for that would also, be originated from user input, and it doesn't need to be escaped or anything, because someone just using it would probably not run the shell, but the manipulation that happened previously through a different chain of attack would affect it. So I think a chain of events here is something that could, escalate it.
You only have proof of concepts though, like we didn't see like this attack actually exist, right?
Yeah, you're right. We haven't seen something like that specifically. I haven't received that as well. It was just specifically someone. The POC itself was just straight up manipulating the object prototype.
So, is the argument there then that this kind of attack would just be harder to detect because, any module you load can just access child process as it wants anyways?
Yeah, but that's not really the case. I'm saying that if you have a model that parses some kind of input and serializes then unserializes it, and that model specifically that does that is prone to the error of the prototype manipulation, then that would be an entry point as an attack vector into the prototype change.
And the same argument could be made for every other API that we have that accesses the system, like even FS and VM, and like this is my argument in there, is I don't see the limiting principle that applies to this specific API that doesn't apply to every other API that accesses the system. It's just this is not unique. It might feel special because it's child process, but you can do the same kind of stuff with FS. You could use FS to wreak similar havoc.
That's definitely true, Rod. That's why I'm saying that you guys are correct, and this doesn't have any specific effect to the child process, except maybe just the coding convention. But I agree with that. Totally accept that.
Yeah, I think from, sort of my current thoughts on this is that given that it's Sember major, so that we may actually affect people and, cause some breakage, and it's not like if it's not unique in terms of like it actually, completely closes a hole or solves a problem or and there's lots of other ways to do the same thing, the trade-off between, avoiding making changes that hurt existing code versus something that might help, I'm leaning towards we should not affect existing code.
Yeah, I accept that as well.
I know, Gabriel, you'd mentioned some concerns. Do you have anything to add, or?
I was just thinking. My only thought was that having basically requiring that only own properties be accessed is not necessary. Is like an arbitrary restriction, because the prototype chain it does not begin and end with object prototype. Like there's a you could have some sort of object oriented system which produces options for this call, right? And so there could be other objects on the prototype chain besides like object.prototype. So this could be a subclass, and the options could be assembled by various independent modules, and so you have like this polymorphism going on, and then in the end it results in an options object. Like the prototype chain could be any length. You don't need to go to object.prototype, right? But on the other hand, I realized that if we do sort of require that only own properties be used, then we're essentially saying, render the options before passing them to us, and then we pass off the responsibility of handling and aggregating options to the application, right? So in that sense, we get stability and we get like plausible deniability, right? Because like if the application assembled the options wrong, well, we can't help that, And if the application was duped by a hijacked object prototype, then well, it was the application that was duped. It was not us, right? So I get kind of both sides of the story, but yeah, like the object prototype is not the only thing. I mean, you could hijack like APIs, like methods and stuff. You could replace them with like your own native add-on. I mean, why not? You could monkey patch FS and stuff. So like we don't have very strong protections, is my understanding, right? So, I mean, it doesn't seem like this would be like a drop in the bucket, I don't know. Am I way off base? Like,
no, that's kind of my, it's the drop in the bucket is certainly part of what factors into my thinking.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we wanted to keep, and we've talked about this many times, right? Like, shall we keep the user code at arm's length or not, right? But then we need to take a systematic approach. And I'm not sure could this be part of that systematic approach? Like, we require applications to render all objects as flat before sending them to us. But then again, that's much bigger than just child process. So yeah, it's yeah.
I see Nikita has his hand up as well.
Yes, I want to ask if anyone knows any specific code examples that would break, like not just artificially constructed, but would something in the wild actually break on that? Did anyone see any concrete code that would?
Like, Loran, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I've read anything in terms of people saying this is an example of something that was broken, but it is marked December major because it's possible.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize that was towards me. I don't think this is breaking anything. So why did we tag it as material tagged it? Because it's possible breakage, but not because it actually broke anything. So the fix itself is pretty simple and obvious. I don't know if the tests were failing because of that. I think it was different reasons for them to fail. So I don't have any input on that, whether this would break something else. I would incline to not thinking it would, but just gut feeling. So I don't know.
In my experience, this type of change always breaks somebody.
Nice.
Like this is my experience. So the moment you change something like this, there is always somebody that is manipulating, doing something with the prototype and having something moved around in this specific way, even if it's not safe, even if it's problematic, whatever. I certainly remember me doing it in the past. So in exact this situation. So yeah.
Yeah, you folks are with the experience on this, so I don't really have any better input on that.
Have we run this through SIGGEM, like, preemptively to see, if it breaks SIGGEM, then it certainly breaks the ecosystem, right?
I don't think we've done that. Would that change people's thoughts significantly? Like, I guess I'd ask.
We have done that. We have done that. I don't remember the outcome.
For this particular one?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't, but we were lost in the conversation and we didn't really I didn't look. Like, I ran it, but then I think the output is gone.
Okay.
Like a month ago. Yeah, output is gone.
Yeah, I can see that too.
So at this point, is there anybody on the TSC? Oh, sorry, Nikita, you have your hand up again?
Yes, I wanted to say that that would change my thoughts on that if something in the Canadian development fails. But my current expectation is that nothing would fail, probably because I don't think that too much things in the Canadian gold mine, the gold mine tests, are actually using shared process, just shared process to execute stuff. I don't think that there are too many libraries that do that. So my expectation would be that there would be nothing in the achievement that it won't change the current situation. So we can do that in the background, but I don't think that we really should block against that.
Right. So I guess at this point, it's, do we have additional questions, things to discuss in terms of understanding the issue? And, I guess that's the first question. Are there other questions or things that people think we should talk about?
I think there are enough -1s in the thread to say that this is not going to happen. Yeah.
Does anybody have, is anybody here a strong proponent such that they want to argue we should do something other than basically say, yeah, it's not likely to happen? So does anybody object if we put a comment in it saying, we brought it to the TC, we had the discussion, there were no strong supporters, there are some objections. So, the consensus seems to be that it shouldn't land.
I'm good with that.
I'm good with that too.
I'm good.
Okay, so unless there's objections, I'll put that into the issue, and people can still, we won't close the issue. We'll comment like that, and if there's continued discussion, maybe something will change, but otherwise that seems to be the direction that it's going. Loran, thanks for taking the time to come in and help us out with this. Unless do you have anything else you want to add before we move on to the next issue?
No, thank you a lot. I've learned a lot from the process. So thanks for all the feedback and the input.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on to the next issue, which is lib hides lots of internal properties, 23.126. Just opening that up. I'm looking to see who added this to the agenda in case, or if you're here, please speak up.
Ruben did. So he's not here because he's not on the TSC.
Right.
It sounds to me like him adding this to the agenda was mostly awareness raising. Because he basically said this needs some reviews.
Okay, so if there's, sorry, continue.
Yeah, at least Michael Zasso, Colin, and me are not really a fan of it, as it seems.
Okay, so if we believe it just needs some awareness, if it was just for awareness, we could leave it in GitHub until our next meeting, and hopefully it gets resolved before then. Otherwise, ask if there's a specific question. Does that make sense? Because I do see the conversation is still going on.
It's not going on very actively. It doesn't sound unreasonable to vote over this at some point, but yeah, Ruben didn't put an explicit question anywhere. Maybe we should wait for that, and until then, it's just like, hey, people, look at this, read some of the discussion at least, and say what you think.
Okay. And so do you want to remove it from the TSC agenda? I guess I'm just trying to think based on our, no, we have to discuss it in the meeting. Then we could either remove it from the agenda and say, hey, we're aware there was some discussion. We're moving the TSC agenda until there's like a more specific question. Does that make sense to people, or should we do something else?
I'm just trying to figure out if any of these are in like frequently used code, because especially the ones that where he introduces like a common object which he then spreads out into the various ones, that could have performance impact. But as far as I could tell, all the places were just like where things were getting set up, so it's not actually like in a tight loop or anything. But I could be mistaken because I'm not that familiar with the code. But the performance thing is my only concern. But if it's not in places that run often, then it looks okay. Especially since this stuff doesn't make it disappear. It just means you need to use that util to actually see it. So I don't know. Did you guys or anybody else who looked at it see whether any of these changes were in like sensitive in terms of performance places? Because I couldn't find one.
I mean, that object construction, so like it might have performance implications, but probably not huge ones.
Right. Yeah. That was my conclusion too. So I mean, in that sense, I don't think we have an issue with it, right?
Right. Yeah. That's not what the discussion has been about.
To me, you just need to measure. Like,
yeah, true.
It's and if there is no benchmark that covers this or no quick example that covers this, we just ask can you add something, or can you put an example or whatever? Like,
but I think Anna's point is that that's not really been the concern in the first place. Like, the discussion has been around other reasons for not wanting to do it. So we probably want to resolve those before asking for any performance runs or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I absolutely agree.
So I guess I'd say, like, that's my suggestion. Does anybody object to, we'll put a comment in that we did discuss it. There's awareness, we're going to let the discussion continue there unless, it comes back to the TSC with like a request to make a decision one way or the other, or some other specific question.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Nikita was speaking to this issue, right? When you said that we should also talk to the security working group.
I think that was a different thing.
I was speaking about the previous issue that we talked about first.
Oh, okay. Because I don't know. I mean, this shouldn't have any implications because I believe that the properties were carefully chosen to have the same effect as if just setting them directly. So, but yeah.
Okay, so if there's no objections, let's do that, and we'll move on to the next issue, which is 24.938, which is adding broadly support.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I mean, it's my PR.
Yep.
So the PR adds broadly support to Node. It's a redo of an older one that we had a couple months ago. And unlike that older one, it does not add a new module or anything. It adds methods like the existing zlib ones to the zlib module. Well, Brian White has objected to doing that specifically, to adding it to the zlib module. I've pinged the TSC in there, and I like, basically my question at this point is, like, does it make sense to vote on this, like, this point? because I don't want to have this like lying around for the next 2 weeks because we're not gonna have full meetings, I assume.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, but that's, at least in my mind, a good assumption. I guess, yeah. So the question to people is, are we comfortable calling for a vote now, or do we think we need more time for the consensus seeking process to take its course?
I mean, I'm not assuming that Brian White is going to change his mind, but
Yeah, I would add to that as well. Like, and I don't know that we necessarily need to vote if, as the TSC, we have consensus that this should land, right? I don't know exactly how the process goes there, but I feel like if we have consensus here, we don't necessarily need to vote. I don't think anyone.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Okay. If we can, but we'd need to basically say yes. This can. The TSC's looked at it and we've decided we think this should land. Basically, overriding the objection that is in the issue itself.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was an objection. What's Brian's objection to this?
Well, Brian's objection is basically that like this is not an actual Zlib-based stream, and like as in it is not based on the C library Zlib. And I guess his assumption is that it might be mildly confusing for people to find this under this module name.
Is this introducing a new C library, C++ library? Or
yes.
What's the line? Okay.
It's
okay, so the objection is primarily just the naming.
Yeah, it's basically that there's something under Zlib which didn't come from Zlib.
Right. Yeah.
And from what I saw of the issue, there's some of the discussion is, well, the module itself was badly named in the first place. So.
Yeah, and I think the intention would be that once we have namespaces, we would create the Node.js namespace, whatever it would be called, compression, keep Zlib around as an alias, potentially even deprecating the alias within the namespace. We'd likely have to keep Zlib itself around forever, but just that like we would have a path forward to better naming as well.
So with regard to the decision-making process here, are we saying that the consensus seeking has reached an end in that issue, or are we short-circuiting a natural process that should be taking place in every issue?
Well, that's Anna's question. Are we comfortable one way or the other?
I would say that like the discussion has kind of stalled out 4 days ago or so. I think all arguments that could be made about this issue have been made. Like it's not a terribly long thread.
Yeah, I think I agree with Nikita. Like we only need to vote if some of us disagree with the rest of us, and we need to establish a clear majority. But yeah, I don't like. I'm not one to disagree with this PR, so I'm okay with it too.
Sorry, does anybody object?
Exactly. Good question.
Well, it's does anybody do object to us overruling the objection?
I guess something that we could do is maybe we could reach consensus on a timeline, rather than it just being like, let's land it today. We're close to the end of the year. Perhaps we kind of raise in there, hey, if consensus in the issue cannot be reached by like the beginning of the new year, the TSC is okay with it landing as it is, and then perhaps still trying to find a way to reach consensus, because, it's going to be demotivating if we just overrule an objection. But at the same time, if the core of that objection is naming, and that's not something that we're looking to change, we're not looking to make a new module out of this. I don't think that's like people will object to that, and multiple people object to that. Then, yeah, I don't really know how we don't end up at a standstill on this one.
Right. Yeah.
I think whatever we do, we just need to pay mind to the precedent that we set here. It feels a bit quick to me to be doing it like this, and having a TSC member open a pull request, get an objection, take it to the TSC.
Right. Yeah. That's
the optics are not great. I mean, I see the path. It seems logical to me.
Rod, one thing worth bringing up on that a prior pull request for Brotli has been open for months, and it was stalled partially because of the way it was designed. And this new pull request, doing it this way, was so we could install it.
Right. I hear Rod's comment though. Like, is there a time period that we could pick that where we feel we haven't rushed things, or is it that if we comment that now at all, we're basically, foregone conclusion?
I think New Year sounds fine.
I guess we just don't know Brian's availability and schedule, and if they're already gone for the holidays and come back to find that we gave a window that they couldn't. You know, how about, should we just bring Brian into a future meeting and have them have a chance to talk with us about it before we override their objection?
I mean, I guess if you all want that, that would be okay. But it would, like, the thing that I want to avoid is like having this lie around for 3 weeks because we're not doing meetings.
Yeah.
And I think Brian has made his arguments in the thread.
Well, if we can say, look, the TSC is unconvinced that there's an argument here. So if it was to come to a vote today, it looks like it would just be unanimous from the TSC. And so, Brian, if you feel that the TSC is just not seeing this right, or you haven't stated your argument well, then could you either make it in the issue so that we can see it more, or come to a meeting and talk about it? Like, I think that's fair. Maybe he's just not expressing himself well enough in there. And there's an argument that we would all be blown out.
Does somebody else want to write that down who is not the person who opened the PR?
Sure, I'm happy to add a comment in there saying, we discussed this in the TSC. Most of the TSC members seem to think it's fine, it's okay. However, we want to make sure we fully understand. Brian can either add some more comments, or are you available to come to our first meeting in the new year? And I guess it doesn't avoid the waiting over the new year, but it seems to me that's the prudent thing to do in this case, as opposed to sort of rushing and potentially overriding a process that should follow its natural course.
Yeah, sounds good.
That sound good to everybody?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next issue then. The next one is under Node.js, nodejs.org, which is 1923, reinstate link to NIM in debug documentation. And I'm going to ask that we time box this to 5 minutes. And I guess I'm just looking at what else is on the agenda. Well, I think we're going to need to skip our regular tracking board updates and strategic initiatives unless there's something key there. And the design presentation, I don't know who was going to give that, so we may not have them anyway. So let's dive into that one, 1923. Trying to see, we did discuss this last week and asked people to take a look. Has anybody done that and want to speak up?
Sorry.
Yeah, I think I can summarize. It's probably not complete, but basically the idea is that we've been linking to a specific tool that is a Chrome extension, and so the objection has been that that is potentially a legal issue because we're recommending a specific product, and also perhaps a security issue in case the Chrome extension becomes compromised. And so the link is no longer there, and the request is that we reinstate the link because in reality, despite all these potential ramifications, in reality the Chrome extension is very, very useful, and most people have found it to be sort of a great relief when they did come across it. And so, you know, do we want to put the link back, or do we want to add the blurb saying, the Chrome extension store might be a place for additional tools, or do we just want to keep it as it is?
And I think I'll just add to that I think it was removed very specifically because the concern was raised that it was collecting email addresses and reporting those back. And then the discussion in the issue is around, I think the author of the module has pointed out that he believes that other modules do the same thing. So at least that's my understanding, that the very specific reason the link was removed is that somebody said, hey, this is collecting email addresses and sending them home. People said, yeah, okay, we'll remove it. But the authors made the case that, well, it's not doing anything that any of the other, many other modules by large organizations do as well, and maybe other ones that we have linked to. So why would it be removed based on that basis, right?
So
I'm more interested in
Nikita has their hand up. I'll raise mine. Apologies.
Yeah, Nikita?
Yes, I want to say that there is an actual discussion going on on GitHub. So I would probably propose to move this to the GitHub until the next week. Like if nothing happens on GitHub, then we can have this conversation again. But I think that we probably, given limited time, we probably should move this for a week.
That sounds reasonable to me. Are there any objections to that?
No, but I am interested in why it makes this issue makes it here, and what we can do to improve the process over there so that the TSC isn't making decisions about that kind of thing. I understand why the seriousness seems worthy of it, but I could see this escalating to, why can't I put my link there, or why does his link get to be there? That's kind of messy weeds.
Yeah, it's definitely a slippery slope to say sorry based on X.
I genuinely believe that we probably just should not be promoting third-party technologies or things that are made not within our org. I don't think that that's an unreasonable position. Rod, to your question about how this ended up here, they had opened an issue to try to get this done, and I think the website working group or the website team itself was not moving at a pace that they found acceptable, that they did not see a solution coming forward. And I was pinged privately to see if there was anything that can unblock it or get some sort of input specifically from the TSC. And since we do have the rule that anyone can raise something to the TSC, I kind of, took that as it being escalated.
Just raising my hand to say the author is commenting in IRC, and they said, this is what we did last week, move it and wait. So I think they were kind of hoping for a quicker decision, but yeah, not sure what to say to that.
I think we should move on. I don't think we should be. This doesn't raise to a level of seriousness that we should be spending 10, 15 minutes on. I'm sorry to the author. I know you'd love to have your stuff promoted, and I am genuinely sorry, but there's plenty of other things that we should care about more that impact the ecosystem more than this. So I think we should move on. Let this play out in GitHub. Delegate it to the website working group. They're the ones that need to decide some sort of policy that can apply universally.
And correct me if I'm wrong, if this does have legal implications, then they can themselves turn to the legal team for support, right? They don't need to go through like a top-level committee.
No.
Good luck to anyone trying to get the legal team.
There is not access to the legal team for people. I mean, people who are part of working groups can request it, but I don't believe that anyone from the website team has specifically asked for legal support on this.
Okay, but it is available to ask, right?
They could, but I also I don't, as the member who's representing the board, I don't think that this would be a great use of the legal team's time, to be honest.
I think Rod's point is, and we really do have, I wanted to time box at 45 minutes. We're at that point for this meeting. So I think the suggestion was, we've delegated the website to the website working group. it doesn't seem like we're at the point where the TSC should be overriding their decision. So we should be letting them work through the process for them to make a decision, and maybe it can be escalated, but it's perhaps not the time for that yet. Is that Rod? Is that sort of what you were getting?
I just want to move on. I just don't.
Yep, +1.
Okay, so unless there's any objections, and again, given that we really need to close out, I suggest that's what we do for now.
Good by me.
Anna has her hand up. Do you?
Sorry, I forgot to take it down.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so I think at this point we'll call it a day for this meeting. The one last thing I would like to say is it is the holiday season for the next couple of weeks. Do we feel that enough people will be around that it makes sense? Like the next meeting is the 26th, the day after Christmas. And then the next one after that is the 2nd. So I guess my proposal would be that we cancel the one on the 26th. Unless there's enough people that say, hey, no, we'll be around and we should hold it.
I'm a +1 on canceling.
Okay, and I'll be back for the 2nd, so we can have the meeting. So we're only basically missing that 1 week. So I'm seeing a bunch of +1s and no objections, so we'll agree to do that. And we'll close out the regular meeting at this point. So I'm going to stop the stream.